Hello, human peoples. You're listening to the podcast network of Gamefully Unemployed. To support us and gain access to great exclusive podcasts like Fox Mulder is a Maniac, Tom and Jeff Watch Batman, Star Trek The Next Futurama, and our latest show, Spiel Boys, head over to patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. We do game streaming, movie nights with our patrons every Friday night, and you can even commission your own podcast about anything you want. Literally anything, within reason, and we have to do it. You are quite frankly out of excuses not to go visit patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. That's patreon.com/GAMEFULLY unemployed, which is spelled like it sounds.
That's bad. 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 That's bad. 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 Bad.
The Dark Tower, everybody's favorite movie.
Yeah, the motion picture event of 2017.
Yep.
Does that seem right? That doesn't even seem like the right year. Like
it kind of does, because if you recall, our previous episode was on 2017's Power Rangers.
Oh, that's true.
So 2017, I don't think was a great movie year. I'm starting to think. But I'm not actually certain about that. I'm getting vibes,
Getting some vibes, yeah. Getting a bit of a shine, a little tingling.
Yeah, let's see.
I'm gonna draw a bunch of pictures of Matthew McConaughey.
So yeah, okay.
Standing in front of his war game table.
I just Googled 2017 movies, and it's, I would say, mixed. Mixed is the word.
I think
movies like Life came out.
I was going to say
Logan.
I think there's a Transformers in there.
Yeah, there's all right. It's a combination of some of the most mediocre films and then some pretty good films. It's like Geostorm, which is great. Jeepers Creepers 3, Baywatch, Power Rangers, Alien Covenant, Logan, Rings, Jigsaw. So you get the idea here. And The Dark Tower.
The Dark Tower.
Yeah, the movie we're talking in this episode of BADAPTATIONS. I'm one of your hosts, David Bell.
I'm a second in number of your hosts, Tom Ryman.
Yeah, and big thank you to Grumblebee. Grumblebee is our producer. They asked us
we can say
nicely.
demanded. We can say demanded.
They demanded that we... Well, they gave us a list, actually.
They demanded.
Yeah.
They gave us a list of demands, Dave.
Yeah, they did. I actually saw The Dark Tower in the list, and I was like, ooh, let's do that this week, mainly because it's a 90-minute film.
It is a brisk 90 minutes, a breezy 90-minute adaptation of Stephen King's 25-year epic fantasy story.
It's a good candidate for this, Tom.
Yes.
I never read the books, but I know enough about them. I have enough friends who've read the books. Mm-hmm. Have you read the books?
I have.
Okay, good. I'm glad.
Recently, too. And by recently, I mean within the last couple of years. But yeah.
Sure.
I read all of them within the last couple of years.
So the way we're going to break this down, if this is their first BADAPTATIONS episode, is we're going to talk about what would make a good adaptation of this story. Mm-hmm. What did this movie get wrong? And mind you, we sometimes have maintained that the movie didn't get things wrong. When we did Hulk, we liked Hulk for the most part. So this is all to say, we don't have to these aren't prompts to shit on the movie if we don't want to. Next section is, how does it hold up? The movie itself. I'm not actually sure of how that's too different than what did this movie get wrong, but I do have some thoughts in that section.
Well, the first section is us sort of identifying what would make a good adaptation of this particular property, whatever it is.
Right, and did this do that?
Yeah, the second one is just how is it as a movie?
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Adaptation notwithstanding.
Yeah. And then... Yeah. Does it hold up in general? I was thinking, adaptation aside, how's it hold up?
Right, because, for instance, I don't know if we're going to cover it, but, the Keanu Reeves Constantine movie, not a great adaptation of the story. I love that film.
Yeah, you could argue, The Shining. Very bad 100%. Adaptation.
Terrible adaptation of the story. Great fucking movie.
Great film. And then finally, any just... final thoughts we have, any freeform, things that don't fit into a neat little package can go in the final
Things that don't slide
conversation.
into a gun belt.
Exactly.
Yes.
So what makes a good adaptation of this? I'm like I said, I haven't read the book, so I'm gonna be the sub here. You'll be the dom.
I'll be the dom. You'll be the sub. Yeah.
Yeah. But as the Annabeth Steele of this, is her name
No.
what's her name?
Wait, from
in
what?
that?
Oh, from 50 Shades?
of Grey.
Anastasia.
Anastasia
You
Steele.
You didn't go hard enough with that. Annabeth is too plain. It's got to be even more over the top, Dave.
Apparently, yeah. I'm just going to throw this out. One imagines what would make a good adaptation of this is something that isn't 90 minutes.
Correct.
Perhaps a mini-series, perhaps several films, like a Lord of the Rings. Because the one thing I know about The Dark Tower, more than anything, is that it is long. It is an epic.
It is an epic
Yeah.
by every definition. It's got a million different ideas in it. Some of them are great. Some of them aren't great.
It's very Stephen King.
It's a Stephen King story he started writing in 1970. It didn't get published until 1982, and he wrote at it off and on for the next 22 years. I think the last book, Book 7, The Dark Tower, finally got published in 2004. It's this really, if you've never read it, which I'm assuming a lot of people haven't, Stephen King himself has frequently talked about when he goes and does book signings. He'll be like, okay, how many people here are fans of my books? And they'll raise their hands and be like, okay, how many people here are fans of The Dark Tower? And he says, like, invariably, it's always like a very, very small number of people. So even within Stephen King fans, not a lot of Stephen King fans have read The Dark Tower.
Right.
Because it's intimidating. It's a 7-book thing. It's really weird. It's like some of the weirdest storytelling he's ever done. It's very meta. It's very time loopy. There's multiverses and alternate dimensions. We might actually be better primed for Dark Tower now because it deals so much with multiverses and alternate Earths.
Yeah, I had a question,
Yeah.
and not to get too much in the movie, but there's a heavy implication that The Dark Tower deals with Stephen King's, I want to say, Upside Down, where is like it's Stephen King. This is the vibes I get. The I'm guessing here is that it seems like it explains where a lot of the other supernatural elements in his other books come from.
Yeah.
Is this other universe?
Sort of. It's from these
yeah.
other worlds. So, like, yeah. Like Pennywise comes from the same beyond the dimension that they talk about in this movie.
Right.
That's where that alien comes from. Yeah. So, like, definitely a good adaptation. I would agree. Yeah. The best way to do it would be to do it as I would even not say a mini series. I would just flat out say a series.
Yeah, if
like
I were
3 to 4 seasons of a Netflix show or something. Like,
yeah, if I was Mr. Netflix, owner of the Netflix empire,
yeah, Professor Netflix, yeah,
Professor Netflix, I'd grab Michael Flanagan and others, not just Michael Flanagan, but I'd get a bunch of horror people, and I'd say, you know what they failed to do with the Conjuring universe? We're gonna do that with the Stephen King universe, and we're gonna make a television show of The Dark Tower. And then we're going to make a bunch of movies that like cinematic universe Stephen King, but not in any, not in a dumb way, in the way that these all movies kind of already do, where it's like, oh, he's got The Shining. That's what The Shining is. Like, which I assume is what they have in Dreamcatcher. You know what I mean? Like, whenever there's like a psychic or magical person, I'm assuming it's all from the same magical source. And like Carrie, I always assumed Carrie had whatever, like,
probably.
Yeah, exactly. And so you tie it all together a little more cohesively and have a cinematic universe that is, again, not really connected. Like, there's no equivalent of like Thor coming into one movie, and then there's no like Thanos or big together movie. But you know what I'm saying here, which is like it's all thematically and like visually the same world, and like there's hints that it's all connected. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And like if a character is in multiple stories, it's played by the same actor, and so on.
Yeah.
And it's really weird to me that, Professor Netflix or Dr. Hollywood hasn't like sat down and just done this, And this The Dark Tower felt like an attempt, which we'll get into, but not a very good attempt, not a very, a half-assed attempt, I would say.
Really under-realized, I'll definitely say that.
In terms of an adaptation of The Dark Tower, I always imagine it is sort of like the backbone that like that in The Stand almost, where it's all the apocalypse, the end game of this bigger universe of like fucking monsters and magic, right?
Yeah.
It's Lovecraft shit,
Yeah.
Where it's all kind of the same universe.
Yeah, it's that, and
Boogans.
it's also it's the shared universe of Bogginses. It's also I mean, I think we've already said it, but it's Stephen King's Lord of the Rings. I mean, it's very, very,
Yes.
the story is about Roland, who is pretty clearly, I mean, he's King Arthur, and he's also Aragorn. He puts together a fellowship to walk to a tower. I mean, that's
does.
what the story is.
Yep.
So, this movie, the main thing that this movie fails at capturing is the epicness of how the Dark Tower feels, at least when you're reading it. Like, it's so dense. Like I said, it spans a quarter of a century of Stephen King's life, just sitting and writing it all fucking down.
Right.
It's this huge, huge, huge story that's, like I said, it has good parts, it has bad parts, it has some really bad parts. But it's all weird, and it goes to wild places that you can't predict.
I would argue that's every Stephen King, right? Thanks to a little friend named cocaine. There's always at least one part in every Stephen King book where you go, what the fuck? Where you're just like, come on, man.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, and I don't know how under the influence of whatever he might have been at any point during writing this. I know he wrote a good chunk of it after he was sober. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. I think that's, anyway, I don't want to go on and on.
Well, let's go into what the movie got wrong. Right?
Yeah, that's the main thing to me, is that a 90-minute Dark Tower movie should make everyone's eyebrows go up. It's like, really?
I remember, again, knowing little about it when this was first announced, it was like, okay, casting amazing. I'm sorry, how long? 90 minutes. Okay, like it feels like, I'm guessing a lot was cut out, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
Because it's actually kind of confusing, the movie.
The movie's very confusing.
In general. Yeah, and so it feels like what happened is that they didn't commit, right? And then they got to a point where someone said, well, let's at least not waste their time. Like, this is a tragedy. We fucked up. Let's at least make it 90 minutes. Like, that's what it feels like, where it was like, okay, well, if this is a 2.5 hour abomination, that's worse than a 90-minute abomination. Mm-hmm. So that's what it feels like, and I kind of appreciate the movie for that it's just like, okay, let's just wrap it up. Because going into what the movie got wrong, even if it was 2.5 hours, it feels very small. Was there a special boy in the plot of the book?
Not really.
Okay, because that's the other thing. This feels like it's not actually an adaptation, right? It's supposed to be like a sequel or something?
It plays like a sequel. So, like, the way, it's... the way the story works is it's... I don't know if cyclical is the correct way to describe it.
I am aware of that.
But it ends.
Element.
It ends with the beginning. So, like, he gets to the Dark Tower, he walks through the door, and he's back at the beginning of the Gunslinger with no memory of what just happened. And it's sort of like his charge, basically, is to do this over and over and over again.
Yeah, it's like purgatory.
Yeah, to keep the tower standing, basically. At least that's how I interpreted it.
Right. It's like, that's... Time isn't necessarily looping, but he's looping. Like, in what?
No, it is.
Okay, it is.
Yeah, or at least he might be reaching out to these, because he always brings all the same people together, but he might be reaching out to them in like multiverses and alternate. I think that's actually true. So I think you might actually be right that it is just him. But anyway.
Okay. Well,
so
by the way, we should have done this at the beginning. What is this story, Tom?
Okay,
So
I think.
can I guess? Can I make a guess?
Yes, please do.
All right. There's a big old tower. And if the tower is destroyed, then this underworld, this Mortal Kombat realm,
Outer world is more appropriate, but
outer world, merges with our human Earth keystone, as they call it, Earth. And this man in black, who is some sort of villain, one could call him the devil, is trying to bring upon the apocalypse by, and this is what they absolutely don't explain, kidnapping psychic children with the shining and using their shining in some sort of negative way to harness their power to topple the tower. And for whatever reason, never explained, the tower is basically the only thing holding together this world so it doesn't break into our world.
Correct.
Am I in the ballpark?
Yeah, no, you've got it.
Okay. And that's the book as well.
Sort of. Like
Got it.
it's a super simplified version of it. There's actually multiple towers, I think. Because it's basically like a wheel, and the Dark Tower is the one at the center holding everything up. But there are like points that would be like the outward spokes or whatnot. Anyway, we don't need to get into all of that. But like
We don't, but like it is important to know, like, what was this story supposed to be about?
Well, the Dark Tower holds up all of existence. All of as Roland describes it in the movie, very briefly, but it's basically all you really need to understand, but it is still kind of confusing.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, you're 100% correct. That is right. That's it.
And what is not Roland, Walter is the man in black?
Walter O'Dim, I believe, is his name.
Okay, is it in the book too?
Yes, but usually they just call
right.
him the Man in Black.
What does he want? He's going to rule?
He just wants chaos. Like in the story, they don't introduce it in the movie, but you can see it like in graffiti. You'll see graffiti that says like "All Hail the Crimson King," and there's a couple of references that you'll see in the background to the Crimson King.
It's like a True Detective thing.
That's the King in Yellow, but yeah.
Sure.
It's the same basic idea.
It's all the same.
It's this Lovecraftian Boogans who...
Matthew McConaughey.
Well, McConaughey's actually working for him. Or it.
Got it.
More accurately. Who's just... That would more accurately be the devil. Or like some crazy eldritch being that just wants to exist in chaos. And there's this one pocket of infinite worlds that it can't get at. And it's driving it crazy. So it enlists... people like the Man in Black to help it knock down the tower so it can get in and have a little chaos party and eat everybody, I guess. I don't know.
Okay.
Man.
Okay.
Why does evil do
that's
what
all
it
we
does?
need
It's
to
just it's a vague evil. Like that's
like,
what it is.
Yeah. This seems like a really cool story that could have had a cooler. Is there tech in the books?
Yeah, basically the best way to describe it is, and I'm sure there's a king head, some real Dark Tower fans out there who are screaming at me for getting some details wrong. I'm doing to the best of my memory. Roland's world, which is called Midworld, is an alternate Earth. It's an Earth parallel. Only his Earth is like centuries after an apocalypse. So he's basically living in Horizon Zero Dawn, where like so much time has passed that they don't remember what these buildings are or were for.
Yeah. It was that's like my favorite part of the movie.
Yeah.
And it's not much of the movie.
No, they actually most of the story takes place in Midworld in the books. But in this movie, which actually I think is one of its strengths as an adaptation, because wandering through the wastelands in the books gets really boring, and it kind of makes some of the books
gets boring in this movie too.
Yeah, it's kind of a slog to get through it. But like when Roland comes through into our world, we get all the fun little interactions, and that's like when more of the character stuff happens. So I think it was one of the things this movie does smartly as an adaptation is set more of the story in modern world, so we get like more fun beats with Roland and Jake.
They Crocodile Dundee.
Yeah, you Crocodile Dundee him. It's fun.
But like that doesn't seem like the book. The book is, like you said, like Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
And so
but
it's supposed to be this long epic.
Dave,
with again,
let me tell you, they do cross over into modern world, and let me tell you, 9/11 is a major plot point.
Yeah, sweet. But again, there's no special boy. in the book.
I don't think so. I think it's
very
more,
weird that this is Artemis Fowl.
Kinda,
like a
yeah.
little bit.
I don't think that it's specifically children, but they do have these little facilities. Basically maybe it's not in their, it's like in their version of Gondor, I think, because they also have a version of Mordor where they go in and everything's just fucked, and that's where the Dark Tower is. But they do have like this facility where all of his little rat helpers, I forget what they're called, are strapping, like they are using people with the Shining and with psychic abilities to drive these engines that is knocking down all the towers. So that's is
not like
in
a
the story.
major part of it. Yeah,
I mean, that's their plan. Like that's what they're doing.
right. But it does feel weird that this is from the point of view of a child, right?
Right.
Like that doesn't seem right.
Jake is not the main character of the story, even though he's a major character. But it's Roland's the main character. But I will say that I actually don't think that that's necessarily okay. This is all paving the way.
You don't think that's what they got wrong?
No, I think this is my spiciest take that I can have about this movie. I think this movie adapted The Dark Tower as a YA story, and I think that's not a bad instinct, because if you break The Dark Tower down into like there's, like I said, there's so many ideas in it, but if you break it down to its main ideas, it is kind of just a YA story.
That's interesting.
Because it's all about hidden worlds within our own, and like, you know,
it's Harry Potter.
Yeah, it's very Harry Potter, to the point where Harry Potter actually bleeds into it in Wolves of the Kala, I think, the 6th book, I think. So does Doctor Doom. It's fucking wild. Stephen King himself is a character.
Amazing.
Stephen King writes his own accident where he got run over by a minivan.
Is he also writing the books in it?
Yes, he has. Then it becomes a plot point where they have to protect Stephen King from being killed.
I mean, I love that because well, I actually almost wrote something similar in a script. Because the idea is when you get to like Eldritch shit, when you get to like these like unknowable, like vast, weird, surreal concepts, it almost fundamentally has to become meta. Mm-hmm. And so like I love that idea. Like In the Mouth of Madness is a very good example
100%.
of a horror, of something going meta in a way that you're like, what the fuck, you know?
Yeah.
And it's good.
Yeah. In point of fact, in the story, Jake is killed pushing Stephen King out of the way of the minivan.
That's amazing.
Yep.
Yeah. See, I almost imagine this movie or this world as being actually more like In the Mouth of Madness, which just feels like that's a commentary on Stephen King as well, right?
It's definitely written more like that. It's more horror, even though the book isn't. I wouldn't classify it as horror. It's like dark fantasy, but there is obviously, because it's Stephen King, there's a little horror in it. So it's not. This movie is like the PG-13 kid-friendly version of it. But I don't feel like adapting it as a YA story was necessarily the wrong instinct.
No, but I do think that you have to ask this question, right? When you're adapting something, where you stand back and you go, "Who is this for?"
Right.
And when you adapt, say, The Hunger Games, that's for an audience that also read The Hunger Games.
Right.
Doing this and being like, "Well, yeah, we want kids to see it." Bad instinct. I do think you're right that using the structure of YA and then just making it actually more adult might have been a better instinct, right?
Yeah.
Like, had they made a longer miniseries, made it actually fucking gnarly, and then also structured it like a young adult story, all those combinations, it might have been quite good.
And I also...
Like a Stranger Things, almost.
Yeah. Yeah. I also think that what they've done by making this essentially a sequel, like this movie takes place after the last book, basically.
Right.
Which, if you're a fan of the book, you'll notice, because you can see that Roland has the Horn of Eld on his back. And that's only going to make sense to people who read the book. But so you know that this is like after the book. So it's not actually an adaptation, it's a sequel. I think that's a good idea, because the books are so dense. And the book kind of ends with this real bleak but cool idea, but very bleak. So like this movie is like, well, let's have Roland break the wheel with this movie. So it's a little less bleak, and then by making it a sequel, you can sort of focus on the more important plot points and kind of like whittle down some of the other stuff. Because like I've said already a few times, there are a zillion ideas in this series. There's so much.
Yeah.
So it's like I think making it a sequel and kind of using Jake as the entry point instead of telling it from Roland's point of view. And Jake shows up immediately anyway. He's in the first story and he's a major character throughout. So it's not like weird.
I also know why they did that, which is smart, is that it's actually really smart. Unfortunately, the movie's bad, but you start with a character who represents the audience.
Exactly.
Introduce them. Like, that's what they were doing. I want to merge to the question, how does this hold up as a film, if that's all right?
Yeah, sure.
Because I want to nail down exactly the problem with this movie. Because 90 minutes as an adaptation, bad idea. You're saying they did have a lot of good instincts in this movie. I would say what really looks... Yeah, I say the production design of this movie is fantastic. Mm-hmm. The world looks good. But ultimately, I think there's one word to sum up this movie. And let me know if you agree. Mm-hmm. The word is forgettable.
Yes.
And so I asked the question, what makes this movie forgettable? What makes a movie forgettable? And what makes this not work? Despite the source material being so rich. Like, it's so wild that someone read all these books only to produce a 90-minute, extremely forgettable film.
I think I have a theory. Well, I mean, I don't have a theory. This is what I think makes this movie not hold up. Even though I enjoy the movie while I watch it, I always forget that it exists.
Right.
It trims everything down so much that, like we said, it's confusing, so the stakes aren't clear. We're not entirely sure what anybody needs to be doing at a given moment. The character deaths that occur, with the exception of Catherine Winnick, with the exception of Jake's mom.
Jake's hot mom, yeah.
Right.
He gets bullied for that hot mom.
Oh, yeah, he does.
Yeah.
So why do you think that
kid has a hot mom?
Why do you think that kid's hanging out with him? It's not because he's his friend. It's because he's got a hot mom.
Yeah.
The character deaths that happen, we don't know these. We've spent so little time, especially like Roland's dad. Like, we don't give a shit about Dennis Haysbert because we don't know him. He says 2 lines and then he dies, and then that's supposed to be like,
we don't care about
Roland's
fucking Lon.
motivation. Why would we care about Lon? He sucks.
Yeah,
but
we don't care about anybody. When they go and visit that village, I'm like, I don't give a shit about any of this.
You don't know any of these people. So it's like, we don't know what the stakes are. We don't really know like what the state of Roland's world is. We're given very little information of that. Yeah.
They never make Jake likable. They never show Jake like, I'm just a normal kid having fun. Like, they never give him that Harry Potter treatment. They never do anything to make us like we know, okay, this is the main character.
Yeah.
But he's not that likable. Roland is pretty much the only likable character, and he's still like kind of an anti-hero. He's like funny because he's so serious.
Right, and he's not in the movie that much.
He is. He certainly is.
It takes about, I want to say, almost 30 minutes before Roland's actually in the movie.
Right.
Maybe it's not that long. I mean, they've got... I think that's the main problem, is in order to make it 90 minutes and in order to sort of trim out all the fat and make it move along at a pace that they figured was acceptable for a movie like this, they sort of eliminated any reason for us to care or any way for us to get really attached to most of these characters outside of Roland and Matthew McConaughey, who I will say is probably the strongest thing that this movie does is its casting, right? Casting Roland and the Man in Black. And
so I think this needs a Deadpool, right?
Yeah.
They need to make a miniseries. They need to keep the casting.
Yes.
All the casting.
Yeah.
And they just need to do a better job. Because even Matthew McConaughey, though, it did feel like he was phoning it in a little bit. And it's probably because he's like, what the hell? You know, like, it's such a disservice to the casting and the look of this, that it's such a forgettable story.
Like, McConaughey should be more memorable as this villain, even though while you're watching it, I do think he is well done. I love the way they do
He
it.
is.
I love the way they do his magic, where he just kind of commands people to do things and it happens.
He has the one. He commands people to stop breathing, mostly.
Well, he says burn, he says talk.
That's true.
He has a couple.
But his finisher is stop breathing.
Stop breathing or
He
kill
loves
each
that
other.
one.
I
Kill
love what that
What
scene.
was hate? He says to a little girl, hate, and then we never really see what that
Well, her eyes get black and she looks at her mom like, fuck you. So I
Right,
guess he's
and it's
probably
just
just ruined that child's life.
Probably. I still want to see it.
But like, an example of one thing this movie does really well, and I wish the movie as a whole was more memorable, is the scene where he's sort of talking to his two subordinates and they fucked up, they lost the kid. So as he's getting up to leave, he says, kill each other. And then to the rest of the people in the middle of the restaurant, he says, watch. And everybody stands up and turns and looks at the people killing each other. And it's really creepy and it's really well done. And I think that's such a cool idea such a cool way to handle magic that doesn't, and I know why you do it, right? It's so like, well, we don't want to make a special effect every time he waves his hands. How can we do that in an interesting way? It's like, well, what if he
so
just
much better,
what if he just says something chilling and they do literally what he said? That's a cool
great.
idea. Yeah.
I do wish for Matthew McConaughey, I wish he McConaughey'd it up a little more. Does that make sense?
Yeah, he's playing it so like traditional classic bad guy that he's not really having much fun with it.
He's not having that much fun.
Yeah.
That's why I was like, great casting. I feel like he phoned it in a little bit because he's just sort of generic villain. There's a lot of good, like the magic is great. And again, him, it's perfect.
Yeah.
It's just like, it doesn't feel like he needs to be more of a dude.
Right.
More of a McConaughey.
And the weird thing is, like, as written, that the Man in Black is. Like, the Man in Black is very, like, he's a little zany. He's always taunting Roland. He's a little bit jocular. Like, he is a McConaughey type.
Right.
But they play him in this like
he was
such
very similar to
yeah.
the Devil in the Stand. I don't know if that's the same character, but that was
oh fuck. I think Flag shows up in
probably he must
in Dark Tower, but I can't remember if the Man in Black and Flag are the same person.
Right. I just see them as the same general type, and that is a Matthew McConaughey type.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it is weird that we didn't get enough of that. Going back to what makes it forgettable, I think another big part of it is that it doesn't commit to anything.
Yeah.
We said the idea that like PG-13, this should have been horror. This should have had like, I should have saw his mom light on fire. The creatures are very generic. They're just like these kind of slithering dog things. And then there's like these orc-like people. And I don't know how the book describes it, but it's just like, I needed this to feel like a horror fantasy.
Yeah.
And it feels
like an
more fantasy.
epic
than
horror fantasy. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's stuff where it's like, I don't know how, I can't tell how strong the gunslinger is. He goes to the hospital in one scene, and another scene, he falls down a building into a bus and then gets out of it, no problem. And then Matthew McConaughey puts some rubble on him, and they're like, oh no. And it's like, yeah, I mean, the bus seemed like a big deal too. Like there's an inconsistency in the mortality of the character.
A little bit. I chalked that up to his injury that he goes to the hospital for is he got stabbed by an eldritch beast.
Right.
So like he got hurt by something on his power level.
Sure. But then like the rubble.
Yeah.
Like the bus, I don't know. It again, it's a lot of not explaining things. And I would also argue this has a lot of cliches in it.
Oh, yeah.
The fact that it opens with a dream foreshadowing, like exposition dream, not good. Even though the dreams are a part of it, that's still a huge cliche. So many movies have that, like, dream
right,
intro.
and so much of, like, determining what it is they need to do next is just Jake has a vision. Oh, we got to go here now. Yeah, it's like it's not much. It's not very engaging storytelling when that's all it is.
Right, and then even if it is the book, it's the special boy stuff where there's like, he's powerful. Oh, he's more powerful than we thought. oh my God, he's so powerful. And it's like, yeah, I get it. He's a fucking Harry Potter. It's balanced on so many like generic cliches that it's actually easy to like confuse this movie with other movies.
Yeah.
Like you might remember a scene from this movie and then think it was in like The Lightning Thief. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Because it all looks, for the most part, very generic. They don't lean on the stuff that, like, for example, the Horizon Zero Dawn world, they should have leaned on that way harder.
I think they don't realize what they had with that.
Yeah.
Or maybe the budget angle of it scared them, because this movie...
Maybe.
I think originally had a higher budget, and then, like, as production went on, it got cut down into, I don't know what it is now, but it was less than $100 million.
And then
I'm almost positive anyway.
And so, like, it mostly just looks generic, that world.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, it's fields and mountains and then, like, you know, dusty
a couple
plains.
of tents. Yeah, we get to see the amusement park. Yeah, it should have been more shit like that.
Right, and then that weird fucking Dementor or the whatever it is that shows up. I don't know what that was. He never really explains it. This motherfucker, the dad trap, I called it. It's dad trap because it just keeps showing up as dads.
Oh yeah,
in that scene.
It is a real dad trap. Yeah,
it is. It's a dad sim, and it's just like, hi, I'm your dad, and he's like, hi, dad, and then he says darkness and fire, and I was like, that's silly. And then he turns into a blob, and then like Idris Elba shoots it a couple times, and then it turns into his dad, and it's like, okay, so this is like a dad, yeah, it's dad trap. Mm-hmm. And then he's like, that thing's not your dad, and then they just sort of bounce, and then a monster comes out of it, and I was like, I don't know what any of this is. You need to explain.
Yeah.
There needed to be rules, you know, like. I needed to know, like, how does this magic work? Does it have limitations? What is the world? What are the threats? It feels like it just throws a lot of stuff at you that if like watching this, and I pretended there were no books, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
So I couldn't fall back on like, oh, I'm sure they explain it in the book. And when you do it that way, it's like, this is madness. This is monkey business, you know?
It really is.
Yeah.
I think that might be the best way to watch this movie, is to just pretend it's not based on anything.
Right. And then it's kind of boring in the middle.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so this is like this witch's brew of forgetfulness, you know?
Yeah.
Where it's like cliches, in like not explaining enough, very generic looking no characters that we glom onto, generic looking creatures.
It reminds me, and this is interesting because I actually think this movie, this is going to sound weird, but I think this movie I'm about to reference was actually much more successful as both an adaptation and a movie. But this reminds me a lot of the Masters of the Universe movie. Because
that is very good. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Because they take this epic sweeping storyline about this, cool ass sci-fi fantasy landscape with all these cool ideas and visuals and stuff, and throws all that shit out the window to drag these characters into the modern day to have a very forgettable Special Boy story.
Yeah.
And then I know Masters of the Universe isn't really a Special Boy story, but like it reminded me of that in terms of why would you make this the adaptation of that property? Like you've condensed it into such a small box when it's this huge epic thing, and you picked just like a couple of streets in New York City to single out as for the most part. Even though I said I think it was smart to have Roland spend more time in the contemporary world, I still think that's smart for a movie that's 90 minutes. But
it's a good idea, yeah.
But like it feels so small in scope.
The Crocodile Dundee part, which is the best part of the movie.
Yeah.
It's 2 scenes.
Yes.
It's him saying, you have forgotten the faces of your fathers, to 2 ladies on the bus who are reacting appropriate to seeing Idris Elba. Because they're just like, hey, let's fuck this guy. You want to fuck?
Yeah.
Because it's Idris Elba.
Right.
And then the hospital scene where it's very Thor. It's a very Thor.
It's extremely scene. Thor, yeah.
And those are delightful scenes. There are maybe 10 minutes of the movie, might not even be. And then the movie is so tonally weird that we also get the your mom was lit on fire scene.
Yeah.
And so it's like those were great scenes, but they also don't feel like they fit with the rest of this grim ass movie. But then not so grim that it's gory because it needs to be PG-13. So again, it feels like it didn't commit to a tone.
It didn't really commit to anything.
It didn't, not at all.
So in attempting to trim this story down into the most important elements and then commit to them, it didn't actually commit to them. It just trimmed it down to a few elements, and that's it.
For sure. Yeah, and it's like, this is what Marvel gets right. Because Marvel spends time. It spends time on what it needs to spend time on, right? Like, this is the kind of story that if Marvel did The Dark Tower, it would be 10 movies long. And there would be funny sequences that felt earned because they take the time to tonally shift. Like, I would argue I have a lot of critiques of Marvel, but one thing they're for the most part, not always good at, obviously. I'm going to say the Avengers movies, the new ones. They're very good at taking their time for those tonal shifts where, like, you can laugh, and then 5-10 minutes later, you can have an emotional sequence. You can feel bad for a raccoon, because they do the work. They've set it all up with so many movies. But it's like this gunslinger being funny in New York is funny, but I'm not going to ever feel for him as a character because you gave me 90 minutes.
Yeah.
And you're introducing so much.
Yeah.
So much.
Yep.
And it's like, I need 90 minutes just to understand the fucking world we're in.
Yeah.
And that's really what it comes down to, is it's too much.
It feels like somebody grabbing you by the collar and shouting a bunch of stuff at you for 90 minutes and then letting you go.
Yeah.
You're like, what was any of that?
Right, and I would argue also, by the way, this concept is fundamentally funny. And that doesn't mean it can't be good, but there's something very funny about, there's a sorcerer that I'm trying to stop. How are you going to stop him? Oh, I'm going to shoot him. Like, really? With a gun? Does that work? And it's like, yeah, but it's really hard. It's like, all right.
Yeah, it's just really hard. It's really difficult to shoot him.
That's just something funny about a sorcerer versus guy with gun. That's never not funny to me.
Yeah.
But I like it. I know what he's doing. I know the aesthetic he's going for. But like, yeah, it's a world that is a little silly, a little intense. And so it's like, yeah, you kind of need to, this has to be done really well. And not recklessly in the least. And this was done so recklessly.
Yeah. This was it really felt thrown away.
Really did. And it's wild that. Like, there's, can you imagine if they made Lord of the Rings a 90-minute film? that's what this is, right?
Basically,
like, that is the wildest. Like, this adaptation, there was no version of a 90-minute Dark Tower that I think would ever be good. Like, period.
No, I think that's probably true.
Yeah.
It's just
because
there's too many ideas too many important ideas need to be conveyed in order for the story to work.
Right, even
at least
if you just
anywhere
did
close to how it's written, yeah.
Yeah, even if you just adapted like a slice of it, it would still be confusing because you'd be like, I don't know what any of this is.
Yeah.
Tom, why did the therapist have a framed photo
of the Overlook?
From like an aerial black and white shot. It's just like, what is that?
Couldn't tell you, Dave. I mean,
all right.
It's just because they crammed this full of Stephen King Easter eggs because it's the Dark Tower movie, and that's like the other thing that everybody knows about the Dark Tower is that it references all of his other books and stories. Yeah. So
Lord knows when I go to a nice hotel, I buy an aerial picture of the hotel.
50-year-old aerial photograph of the hotel.
And then I frame it and put it in my office to remember.
My
personal photos of the vacation.
No, the photo of the building. He must have had a real good time at that hotel.
Yeah. This is the one last thing I wanted to talk about here is we talked about like cinematic universe. They clearly knew they needed to do that, but they do it in the dumbest way. For example, having just a picture of the Overlook Hotel. Or like the code is 1408.
1408, yeah.
Yeah, it's stuff like that where it's like, this isn't Pixar, you jerks. Work it into the universe. The kid has The Shining. You don't have to show a picture of the Overlook as well. It's like, oh, we can guess that the Overlook also exists.
Yeah, we got it.
So it felt like it was done. Like, it's weird because it's like, I feel mean saying this because someone had to read these books and adapt this, but it feels like it was done by someone who doesn't really care about Stephen King and
for
adapting
sure.
it. It felt like someone who was like, yeah, I'll skim the book and, I'll throw a bunch of Stephen King shit in there. And that was it. So it just doesn't feel like it was done with much respect for the source material. And I imagine because anybody with respect would say, no, I'm not making a 90-minute version of that. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, this is, can't be done.
Yeah. And so they got the person who was like, I'll do it. And like, yeah, that person is probably not going to give a shit. They probably are either starting out. I didn't look up who wrote it. Nothing against that person.
It has 4 credited screenwriters, one of whom is Akiva Goldsman.
What did they do?
Oh, gosh, so many things. Beautiful Mind.
Okay.
A couple of Batmans.
I'm not great with names. Yeah, so they're probably an industry person.
Yeah, he's a writer who's been around. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, nothing against that, but it tends to be those are the people who are like jumping from project to project, doing these adaptations. And some of them are very good. Some of them are David Koepp, but others are not giving a shit. So
I would say Akiva Goldsman is a David Koepp type.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's no writer. Like, this is what I mean with nothing against the writers. There's no one who could have made this good. It's
not with 90 minutes and it's there's too much. There's too much that has to be included if you want to do a halfway faithful adaptation of the story.
Yeah.
And this is I will coming back around to some of the positive things I was saying earlier, this is more faithful of an adaptation than I would have expected.
Yeah.
Like I said, the decision to make it a sequel, I think, was smart. The decision to tell it through Jake's point of view was smart.
Yeah, I would say the decision to make a sequel does also feel like a disservice because, again, I mean, you're right, but still with the length, like, it's like imagining if Lord of the Rings ended with them not, like, defeating Sauron, and then you made a 90-minute film where they do it in like an afternoon. Like, that's what it is. It's like, oh yeah, and then he defeated him and it's like, huh, okay. I guess that was very easy. You're right that doing it as a sequel isn't a bad idea, but again, making it so quick is still like
this movie's bewildering, honestly.
It is.
I constantly forget it exists, and when I remember, it's like, oh, that's right. Wow, what a weird thing that they did.
It's on the list of films that at any point in pre-production, if a studio exec had simply asked the average person who, with knowledge of Stephen King and The Dark Tower, like the average Dark Tower fan or Stephen King person, or anybody who just understands the context, if they had just asked them, they would have said, oh, cancel that project immediately. You're going to lose money. Don't do that. That's such a bad idea. Why would you even think to do that?
This is an awful idea, yeah.
Yeah. It's just, it's a sign of the bubble where it's like, this couldn't be made without a bubble of rich studio executives somehow convinced that this was a good idea. Because terrible plan for a Dark Tower adaptation. Terrible.
Yeah, and I think we'll probably find that that's the case with a lot of the adaptations that we determine were bad. Is that they were made in a vacuum outside when it was people just looking at, okay, brand recognition, buzzy cast, X number of dollars because that's how many dollars a project like this gets, and so on and so forth, instead of looking at the story itself that they're trying to adapt and starting from there, which it's very clear that is not where this project began.
Yeah. Here's my biggest, my most damning thing to say about this. Stephen King writes such fucking weird books.
He does.
That every single adaptation is good or is enjoyable to watch, whether it's good or bad, because it's always fucking weird. Like, a bad adaptation is still enjoyable because it's like this plot is batshit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
All except for this one. This is the only one that I find boring. And generally there's, a couple scenes that I'm like, that's fun. But for the most part, I have very little desire to ever rewatch this film as opposed to any of the others. Even the bad ones. I'll watch the Langoliers, and be like, yeah, I want to see those fucking CGI meatballs. That's wild.
Yeah, get us beholders in there that eat time.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's
what,
like
what a wild idea.
Yeah, cocaine. And so like that's the biggest, most damning thing about this movie is you somehow managed to make a Stephen King adaptation bore me. And that is very hard to do. Dreamcatcher is a terrible movie that I love watching because what the fuck,
Yeah, that movie's out of its gourd. Good God.
Exactly. And so it's just like this is so generic.
Yeah, very disappointingly so.
Yeah.
So this movie is mostly a disappointment. There are things about it that I like as a fan of the story.
And I think those things are very valid that you pointed out already. So.
Yeah. Man, what a bizarre... It's so odd that this movie exists.
Yeah, in a way, it feels like it might someday never exist. Does that make sense? This feels like a movie that in like 60 years from now, there won't be like any copies of it, even though it's even digital. You know what I mean? Where there's some movies that just get lost.
Yeah, this might be one of those.
This feels like one that it's just like, we'll just forget about it. It'll just fade away.
This is definitely one of the things that, like, when Roland walks through the door of the Dark Tower at the end, upon resumption, this movie disappears.
Exactly.
Pretty sure.
Yeah.
Okay, if we're going to reset anything, we're going to reset that this movie got made.
Yeah. Which, again, is a shame because this movie doesn't have the word. It has some good ideas. It has great casting. Mm-hmm. I think the people who made it, it's not badly directed.
No, all the shooting, the gunslinger stuff with Roland is really cool.
Yeah, the gun shit looks really good. The art direction is really good. It's just that this is a case of a script just weighing it down into the abyss. And I don't even blame the people making the script because this movie is like an impossible scenario.
Yeah.
I blame the producers.
Somebody's got to take this blame.
Yeah, somebody has to take it.
Might as well be them.
Yeah. And cocaine, I guess. But
sure.
No, who am I kidding? I love cocaine.
Yeah.
I can't stay mad at you, cocaine.
It's given us so many gifts.
It has. It really has. Sorkin. That's it.
The Last Waltz. Anyway. Fleetwood Mac's Rumors.
Yes, that's very true. Do we have anything else to say?
I don't.
Well, Grumblebee.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Really enjoying doing BADAPTATIONS. We got a couple already picked out for the future ones, and it's going to be interesting. We're going to do some that are really good, like really close adaptations, some that aren't. We're going to have fun with this premise.
Yeah. We're trying to pick interesting ones and not just stuff that's like, oh, that was a really shitty movie, or like, that was a great movie. We're really having fun with this premise. So
Grumblebee gave us
Grumblebee.
They gave us a list to choose from, and we're having fun with that list. So if you're interested, this was through our Patreon, patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. If you go on there's a bunch of tiers, custom podcasts, but also for just $5 a month, you get access to a bunch of exclusive podcasts. Tom and Jeff Watch Batman, Fox Mulder is a Maniac, Star Trek The Next Futurama, and Spiel Boys. We also watch movies with our patrons every Friday night as well.
Do.
That's a tier. So go check that out. It's real cool.
Yeah.
Real cool over there.
We also have a store. Head over to gamefullyunemployed.com where you can find a link to our Teespring store where we have all kinds of cool original artwork and designs you can get on t-shirts, mugs, stickers, posters, all sorts of things. So, toot the little horn of Eld and head on over there.
Yeah.
Slap your little Ratman peepers on that.
Yeah, sling your guns.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Shoot us.
Cast your magic. Shoot us.
Assassinate us. Please don't assassinate us.
Yeah, please don't do that.
I want to live, Tom.
You got to keep the tower from being toppled then.
Exactly.
All right.
Is that a dick thing? Okay.
No, yeah, probably.
All right. Well, bye.
Bye.
Bad.